Okay, let's continue our series on the impacts of Christian history and on these hidden truths. So let's do a quick recap. We first talked about the early Christ movement. We talked about the impacts of Constantine and the Nicene Creed in 325 Common Era. We talked about how there the creed, the canon in Easter was developed, and the creed is we believe in one God. This is when everything started to flow to one version of Christianity. Even though there was multiple versions of Christianity, only one was seen as the truth. The other gospels that had just as much validity as the gospels that were picked for the New Testament were then destroyed or hidden, or I should say attacked. And so they had to be hidden. They were hidden. And then in let's see here. I just want to make sure I'm saying the right dates. And then in 1896, the Gospel of Mary, the Sophia of Jesus Christ, the Act of Peter were discovered in Egypt. And then in 1945, 52 documents from early Christianity were found in Egypt and Nag Hammadi. And so these stories that were told that Christian history, literally his story, tried to hide and suppress and make only men at the center and at the focus start to become irrelevant and inaccurate. I don't want to say irrelevant, but a little bit inaccurate, because we learn that women and slaves and Gentiles were teachers and they were apostles and these things. And so the story is turning. It only took 1,500 years for us to live through this very patriarchal perspective. But now we're starting to see the impact and the importance of women in the early Christ movement. And so now we're going to talk about the impacts of Christian history on women. So here we go. Jesus questioned all social structures, including the honor-shame ideology, which painted men as honored and women as shame. So I talked a little bit about the Romans and what their culture was like, right? That men were they were prominent, they were dominant, women were to be submissive, and women were equal to slaves. So women were to guard their shame or chastity by remaining obedient and secluded. The challenge of these social structures, which valued service, humanity. So I just want to make sure that's very, very clear as I state this here. This is what Christianity, or the early Christ movement. I don't want to say Christianity because that was like, Jesus never said I'm a Christian, right? Jesus was Jewish. So what Jesus was challenging are these social structures. He is challenging that women need to be obedient and stay secluded. He is challenging what the Romans are teaching. So the challenge of these social structures, which valued service, okay, Jesus is saying service, humanity, and faith over political and religious power. So Jesus already knew at the time that, and was experienced at the time, the political and religious power that was occurring. And the time when we look at the Bible, we see when Jesus was mad, he's flipping over the table at the temple because he's so upset at what people are making religion to be, right? They're bringing these lambs for sacrifices and these animals for sacrifices, which if we look at it today, we go, well, I mean, really, the priests probably just wanted the people to bring sacrifices so they didn't have to go out and get food and they could just eat that. They were bringing them money, so they didn't have to go out and get money. And then the church leaders, even at the time of Christ, were saying, oh, well, this is for God. And Jesus knows, no, this is not for God. And that's the same thing that we see today in many aspects, and it's the same thing that has been seen throughout the ages in terms of religion. Again, I'm not saying that religion is bad. I'm not saying that religion is wrong. I'm just saying there's multiple sides of one story, always. Okay, so let me reread the sentence. The challenge of these social structures, which valued service, humanity, and faith over political and religious power, was a threat to Greco-Roman ideology. It threatened the Romans for sure. So these threats could have contributed to early Christian writings' misinterpretation or malevolent interpretation. As an example, oh my gosh, okay, you guys, here's another one that really got me. As an example, the Son of Man is incorrectly translated as the child of true humanity. Okay, so just so you know, the word that is translated is actually child of true humanity. It is not the Son of Man. Okay? And so even here we see the patriarchal influence of the translators of the written word. Okay? They see this as the Son of Man, not the daughter of woman, not even what it accurately interprets to, which is the child of true humanity, but they write it as the Son of Man. Oh, that one got me. That one got me for a while because I was like, come on, man. All right, the church has made quite the claims of Jesus as the Son of Man. Oh, hold on here. Yeah, that translation is inaccurate. To keep women subordinate, the church fathers claim that women are responsible for the sin of the world. Women across time have endured endless. Let me read that again. Women across time have endured unending shame, guilt, and I would argue unworthiness. Okay, now we're going to go deep here. We're going to talk about some religious trauma. And because it's accurate, it's real, it's true, it's many people's experience. I didn't even know religious trauma was a thing, but I've done studies on it and then had to do my own religious trauma healing once I actually knew it was a thing. So let's talk about it. Okay, and I want to be really clear. If you experience shame, if you experience guilt, if you experience unworthiness on a deep level, I want you to take a good listen here. To understand the impacts of shame, guilt, and unworthiness on women, we need to understand religious trauma, which can also be referred to as religious trauma syndrome. Through the work of Alison Downey, who has a PhD in systemic theology with a concentration in Christian feminist theology, we gain access to 3 definitions. Okay, so there's 3 definitions to religious trauma. Here we go. Religious trauma syndrome, RTS, is explicitly tied to authoritarianism. Oh my gosh, this word. Coupled with toxic theology in Christian texts, specifically in doctrines of original sin and eternal damnation. So, when we are taught that we are responsible for original sin, we being women, right? And that if we don't act or believe or show up in a certain way, that we are then condemned to eternal damnation. Think about the impacts of your psyche. This is real trauma here. This is overwhelming. Okay, 2, persuasive psychological damage resulting from religious messages, beliefs, and experiences. And 3, unlike many forms of trauma that occur through acute incidents, religious trauma generally accrues gradually through long-term exposure to messages that undermine mental health. Okay. Whew. Okay, wow. That's a lot. This is all a lot. I'm feeling this. I don't know if you're feeling this in your body, but I'm feeling this for sure. And I want to just honor that if you need support and help, that I highly recommend that you talk to a therapist or a healer or somebody in your community that can help you if you're starting to realize that you may have religious trauma. Okay, shame has been a primary source to control women since the Greco-Roman times, and we've talked about this quite a bit over this series. Christian teachings has regularly advocated a religiously appropriate sense of self as one formed by shame, which contributes to chronic shame and religious trauma. It is through religious formation that people interpret experiences. So let me give you an example. If a child is taught that she is a sinner who deserves punishment, she may believe that those who have authority to punish do so because she deserves it. I want to stop there because this is getting pretty deep really fast. Wow, I didn't remember this being this deep. Okay. Let me pause and let me talk about a story. I truly believed that whatever punishments I got that I deserved because I had been bad. That is inaccurate. We do not deserve punishment. We deserve love. And when we make mistakes, we deserve to be met with love. However, when we grow up in a religion that teaches us that we deserve to be punished, then we actually believe that. And so if you've had the thoughts about that you, and they may not be apparent, they may not be front of mind, but that in some way, shape, or form you deserve to be punished, I want you to know that that is a belief that you were taught that you no longer have to keep. You get to change your belief. Okay, so you get to change that belief, and you deserve love, and you deserve for your mistakes to be met with love. Okay, so the intergenerational religious trauma endured by women over centuries profoundly impacts women's mental and emotional well-being. Per Downey, an example of religious trauma includes the binary of emotions as good or bad and acceptable or unacceptable, which causes an inability to manage the bad emotions. Okay, let's pause here because this is a really big deal. If you've ever felt that you're bad because you have anger, or had thoughts that you're a bad person, that makes you feel shameful, this could be a direct result of religious trauma or religious upbringing. And I want to honor that when we have emotions, our emotions are there to educate us. They're there to inform us. They're there to guide us and to help us. However, it may not seem that way at times. So let's take a minute to talk about emotions, because I love emotions. Emotional resilience, emotional healing, emotional releasing. The emotions are not bad. Now, you could be saying, well, I acted this way and then I did this, or somebody did this to me. How can you say it's not bad? That's the behavior that follows the emotion. That's not the emotion. The emotion doesn't take action. The emotion just sends a feeling through your body. How we react to that emotion, that's the behavior. Okay? There's a difference between the emotion and the behavior. I want to make sure that's really clear. Typically what happens, I'm having kind of like an epiphany moment right now, is when we have these bad emotions that we were taught were bad, not only by our families, but also if you grew up in a religious environment, but by religion. If we're taught that those are bad, then the behavior that follows will typically be bad, right? Because we're punishing ourselves or we're punishing someone around us because they deserve it. Or we deserve it, which we don't, and neither do they. We just haven't been taught how to be with the negative or bad emotions. And this can be a major part of religious upbringing, and we can be shamed for having these emotions. Shamed as in, I can't believe you could act like that. I can't believe you would behave in that way. Shame as in, you shouldn't feel that way. We could be shamed for just how we feel, which is a very secluded and isolated feeling. To be shamed for an emotion, which in kids, they typically they don't even know what they're feeling. And so to be shamed for not even knowing what they're feeling is a very overwhelming experience. And then to be told that they're bad or that God will punish them because of this experience, because of this feeling, you can imagine how detrimental that is to one's mental and emotional and spiritual well-being. So I just want to make sure that we're honoring that there's no bad emotions, that if you've experienced or you've been told that your emotions are bad, that you really talk to someone that can help you through that, and find someone who also does not believe that emotions are bad. If you go to find help and they tell you, oh, well, those are bad emotions and you need to get rid of them, find someone else, okay? And if you need help finding someone, you can always reach out to me. I have a list of amazing healers and therapists. Okay. So the inability to manage emotions can contribute to depression, anxiety, guilt, and addictive or compulsive behavior. Oh my word. It's like this is exactly what the whole world is dealing with right now. This inability to manage our emotions. And I've for a long time now, I've been so enthralled with the hidden truths of spirituality and emotions. And before I wrote this paper, I wondered, how do they go together? Like how is it that emotions and religion go together? And then here it is, right? It's right here in front of our faces that we learn that we're bad or that we need to be shamed because of how we behave, because of what we feel. And that then teaches us that to be ashamed of how we feel. And that's a very isolating experience. That's a very, and when we're having feelings, it's very vulnerable too. When I'm having a feeling, I feel vulnerable. There's many times that I don't want anybody to see me in that way because I feel shameful for having emotions. And again, this is from my upbringing. This is like believing that in some way I'm bad or that God won't love me because of how I'm acting or because of what I'm feeling, excuse me. Okay. In addition to these psychological differences, it is argued that religious trauma produces symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, which includes intrusive memories, hyperarousal, hypervigilance, anxiety, depression, numbness, disassociation, compulsion to reenact, restriction of range of effect, and sleep disturbances. So if you have experienced depression, anxiety, guilt, addictive, compulsive behaviors, depression, hyperarousal, all of these things, disassociation, start to get clear on what your religious story is. Start to get clear on what the stories were about your feelings and your emotions growing up and how God felt about those. Based on the knowledge that shame can be used to manipulate people into obedience and compliance in the name of God's will. And that's really what was happening, right? They were using the name of God, which for a while there, I couldn't say God. For about 4 years, I didn't say God because I felt so much shame around it, but also so much hurt and hate towards the name because of how God made me feel. But it was never God. It was the people that were telling inaccurate stories about God that made me feel that way. Okay. So I assert that the church and Greco-Roman society are responsible for the majority of shame-based mental and emotional health challenges faced by women today. Another common control strategy used by churches outside of shame and fear is guilt. In a 2005 research study on guilt and religion, we learned that Orthodox Protestants and Orthodox Catholics define a universal guilt in the dogma of the original sin. The article states that being guilty and sinful has thus become a part of the human condition. I would argue that since church fathers claim that women are responsible for the sin in the world, women have been forced to hold the guilt of original sin. Now, we know women are not responsible for original sin, but this is what's taught in churches. And so we need to be more aware of our belief systems around shame, our belief systems around guilt, our belief systems around if we believe we're a good person. There's still parts of me that believe that I'm unworthy and undeserving of God's love. I still work with that to this day. The amount of guilt that I feel is pretty much diminished completely. Which is great because I used to feel so guilty for everything, like literally every little thing I felt guilty for. Whether that was like not spending time with my kids or spending time with the kids and not working or doing something like one small thing that I needed to do for myself or not having the house clean or, like all of these things that not getting my to-do list done or, not eating like I needed to eat or like everything made me feel guilty. It used to be everything that made me feel guilty. But fortunately, I don't feel that way anymore. Guilt has pretty much disappeared from my feeling vocabulary. I don't really feel that feeling anymore. And I've really replaced it with compassion and with love. And I'm working on doing that with shame. Shame was much more embedded in me than guilt was. So yes, okay. All right, so we're almost done here. While I found endless amounts of data on shame and guilt related to religion, data was not readily available for unworthiness. As I searched for unworthiness within religion, I struggled to find any sources. Yet so many women struggle with feelings of unworthiness. I argue that the unworthiness women experience is due to patriarchal oppression through Christian history. The indoctrinated beliefs that women are subordinate and subservient to men, and that women were, and in some cases still are, prohibited from speaking or teaching God's work. To support the mental and emotional well-being of women who suffer from religious trauma, we must first recognize and acknowledge the impacts of Christianity, his story has had on women. So, this whole series has been helping us learn truths that were hidden from us so that we can feel more like ourselves, so that we can feel more aligned, so that we can feel that there's another side to it and there's nothing to be ashamed of as women. We also need to understand the impacts that religion has had on our mental and emotional and spiritual well-being, our deservingness, the amount of worth we feel, the amount of shame we feel, the amount of guilt we feel. We need to become very aware of how religious upbringing has impacted our sense of self, how much we love ourselves, how much we love others, and the fear that we have and the amount of control, whether that's trying to control ourselves or trying to control others. And then if we can't control, then feeling that shame that we're a bad person or that God won't love us. And the only reason that I'm saying this is because I've personally experienced everything that I just said. So that is where I will end things today. I highly, highly, highly recommend doing some self-reflection to see what has happened and what has transpired in your upbringing and your religious upbringing, regardless if it was Christian or not, or if you had no religious upbringing. Get really clear on how shame and guilt and unworthiness impacted your life and is still impacting your life. And if you have any questions, please reach out. I'm happy to make recommendations for people who can support you throughout this journey. And I'm sending you so much love. Have a wonderful day.